Uncover the chilling past as we explore why the musket invokes more fear than the AK-47. Discover the unsettling tension of its slow reload and unpredictable accuracy, contrasting with the AK-47's efficiency. Join us to delve into the history of the first firearms and hit the like button if you've got excited. So let's dive into the world of boom boom devices. Firearms, my friends, these are the gadgets that use the power of gas pressure produced by burning gunpowder or snazzy combustible mixes to launch projectiles out of their barrel channels. We've got artillery and shooter guns, even grenade launching thingamajigs. Officially, the legend says that in Europe, firearms popped up in the 14th century thanks to fancy tech that harnessed the explosive energy of gunpowder. This marked a new era in warfare, the dawn of artillery, including its cool cousin, handheld artillery. But the story of the very first shooty thing goes way back, like back in the day back, around the 10th century. Picture this, China inventing fiery spears. It's like a mini fireworks gizmo strapped to a spear, perfect for getting the upper hand in those up-close and personal clashes like within a mere 3-meter radius. You've got one shot, that's it. The trick was simple enough. A bamboo tube open at one end, pointed at the enemy, sealed at the other, fill it up with gunpowder and tiny rocks, light a fuse, and boom! The explosion sends hot gases and rocks flying, scoring hits on foes. Sure, it was a bit bulky and weighed a few kilos, but despite its quirks, this bad boy stayed trendy for ages. Imagine this, the OGs of firearm history were like, let's take some short iron or bronze pipes, seal them up tight at one end, sometimes capping it off with a stick, could be all metal or flowing into a handle. Now, for the no-stick pipes, attach them to these wooden blocks. Think rough and rugged. Loading? Oh, that's straightforward. Just sprinkle some gunpowder into the tube, then slide in an iron or lead bullet. And a shooter? They'll grip it under the arm, rest it on their shoulder, or lean into it. Igniting the charge? Easy peasy. Just put a smoldering fuse near a tiny hole in the barrel wall. Fast forward through the 14th century, and the shooter setup remained fairly consistent. Minor improvements crept in. By the 15th century, we're talking epic battles in Europe. Orleans Siege, Battle of Castellon, Siege of Constantinople. This thing was the star. And in the early 15th century, the big upgrade arrived. Longer barrels, curvy stocks, ignition holes shifted from the aiming line to the side, with little shelves to hold the igniter. Boom! Sighting devices sprouted on the barrels. They called this nifty gadget in Western Europe the culverins, the granddaddy of the arquebus. Caliber ranged from 12.5 to 22mm, barrel length from 1.2 to 2.4 meter or 4 to 8 feet, and depending on whether it was a hand or field tool, weight wobbled between 5 to 28 kilograms or over 60 pounds. At close range, this beast could punch through knightly armor. The catch? It had a considerable spread, so hitting someone at any decent distance was like winning the lottery. Oh, and the reloading took minutes, and the igniting technique, the smoldering fuse, was a major focus stealer. Still, despite the quirks, people stuck to culverins, and here's the scoop: war-trained horses could handle the heat but weren't fans of cannon booms, sulfur stench, and such. So unaccustomed horses would ditch their riders and flee, while folks unfamiliar with the weaponry would surrender, thinking it was some kind of sorcery. Can you believe it? Now, from the latter half of the 15th century, things got even more interesting. They added a twist. They attached a fuse to the end of a lever hinged onto the weapon. When one end was pushed down, the other end, with the glowing fuse attached, touched the priming compound, igniting it. This lever got a snazzy name: serpentine. Sometimes even the whole firearm was called a serpentine. But over in Europe, they leaned towards calling it an arquebus. And in Russia, they went with pistol. The arquebus was loaded from the muzzle, firing short arrows, stones, and later lead bullets. The gunpowder charge was ignited using a fuse lock. The weight of an arquebus was around 3 kilograms, with a caliber ranging from 15 to 17 millimeters. By the late 15th century, an arquebus shot had a muzzle velocity of about 300 meters per second, or almost 1,000 feet per second. Like its culverin ancestor, it could pierce a heavy knight's armor at close range, and similarly, its effective range was also around 40 meters or 130 feet. The length of the barrel in the 15th century was about 30 to 40 calibers, mainly due to the imperfect barrel-making technology of the time and the use of granulated powder. Grain powder was invented around 1420, which made loading long-barreled weapons difficult. The real game changer for the further development of firearms was the introduction of matchlock mechanisms in the early 16th century. Their widespread use was made possible by the general technological advancements in Europe. The most popular was the so-called Nuremberg wheel lock. Before firing, of course after loading the barrel with powder and bullet, one had to wind up the spring with a key, pull the trigger away from the pan to pour in the priming powder, close the pan, bring the trigger back to it, place a lid over it, and then move the trigger towards it. Before pulling the trigger held by the force of a double spring pressed against the lid of the pan, which upon the start of the wheel's rotation automatically moved away, allowing pyrite to come in contact with the wheel, resulting in immediate sparks that ignite the priming powder. Compared to the matchlock, firearms with wheel lock mechanisms had many advantages: ease of handling, greater reliability, and the ability to fire in any weather. But their main drawback was their costliness. Around the same time, a sparky striker flintlock mechanism burst onto the scene in Europe. In this setup, sparks that set off the charge were generated by a piece of flint attached to the cock striking against the steel plate. The charm of the striker flintlock lay in its simplicity of production and use. This design allowed shooters to cut down the time between shots to 1 minute or even less. No wonder specialized squads armed with firearms, musketeers, appeared in 16th century Russia. The next level of firearm evolution came with the introduction of breech-loading models using unitary cartridges. The Swiss gunsmith Pauli was the first to conceptualize these, but it was his former employee Drazy who truly developed the idea. Drazy invented needle cartridges and needle guns. Casimir Le Faucheur also played a role inventing pinfire cartridges. In Drazy's guns, a firing pin and a combat cylindrical spring were used. Multi-shot designs emerged in the form of revolvers and magazine rifles. The future path of firearm development was all about creating rapid-firing weapons, initially with external mechanical drives and later with automatic actions utilizing the energy of the shot for reloading. As Hiram Maxim refined and modernized the design, he birthed the fully automatic Maxim machine gun. Check the link in the hints for more. And of course, developing fully automatic weapons wouldn't be complete without smokeless powder. The modern trend in creating new weapons primarily revolves around technological advancements, introducing new materials like plastic and ceramics, using rimless cartridges, improving accuracy, precision, stopping power, and whatnot. That's how our beloved firearms evolved, always keeping us on our toes. Back around the 16th century, muskets were like the tough guys of weaponry, holding their own in many aspects, even sometimes outdoing our modern specimens. Let's take a peek at the classic AK-47, studied inside and out. In its original form, it used a 7.62mm cartridge. The effective range of the AK was about 350 meters or over 1,000 feet, and the bullet it fired zipped along at 715 meters per second or 2,300 feet per round. When it hit a target, that bullet packed around 2,000 joules of energy. Quite impressive. But all those figures dim when compared to the sheer power and danger medieval muskets could muster. Of course, those heavy muskets couldn't boast rapid fire, but they compensated for their drawbacks with sheer brute force. You see, the caliber they used often exceeded 20mm, weighing 5 times more than an AK bullet. Sure, it didn't fly as swiftly as the AK rounds, but it reached a speed of roughly 500 meters per second or 1,600 feet per second, which ain't half bad. In terms of accuracy, these muskets were quite decent. For instance, a shooter could calmly hit a target at a distance of 100 meters or over 300 feet. And oh boy, the firepower! A musket shot could reach up to 4,000 joules of energy, enough to handle the fashionable armor of the time. That's right, the musket could easily punch through steel breastplates or a wooden shield. The bullets it spat out could inflict significant damage even at over a kilometer away. So while muskets might have fallen behind in terms of speed and reliability compared to modern weapons, their massive bullet power was truly intimidating, almost doubling the energy of an AK-47's rounds.